Okay.
So, good morning. I think we're going to get going since everybody has had something to eat and some coffee. Thank you so much for coming. It's a little bit warmer than it was earlier in the week, but it was still cold today. But thank you. I hope everybody had a good holidays and the start to the new year is going well. And I know there's been a lot of bugs around, and we were very grateful that Chris Comiskey was able to come and speak today, because she wasn't sure if the bug hit her house. But thank you for coming out to talk about the Historical Society and some of the Historical Society's projects in town. Next month, Dr. Dan Tolman, who's been out before and is a hospitalist with Merrimack Valley, or no, the Holy Family at Merrimack Valley, will be our guest speaker. So if you've got thoughts in terms of any questions you want me to get to him, he's always willing to, give me a call and we can send him some more topics. He always comes with great information and handles a wide range of questions for us. So I'm looking forward to that for next month, and we're hoping that the weather will continue to cooperate. Well, thank you for coming out, and you've done such good work in town. It'd be nice to be able to take some time to hear more. I had family visiting from out of town when Chris was doing one of her cemetery tours, and we brought them over for the cemetery tour, and it was like the highlight of the stay. So thank you. I'm gonna go.
All right. Hi guys, as you know, I'm Chris Comiskey. I'm the president of the Georgetown Historical Society. And first of all, before we get started, I want to show of hands. How many GHS members do we have here today? I know we got a few. Okay, got 3 of them. Okay, maybe by the end of my talk, we'll have more people wishing to join. That's my hope, because I'm always trying to set a society. So anyhow, I wanted to start off first of all by talking about differences between the society and the commission. A lot of people don't understand. They think the Historical Society, the Historical Commission, they kind of interchange the names. They talk about the society when they're talking about the commission and vice versa. So a lot of people are confused about that. So what we are not the Georgetown Historical Commission. The Historical Commission was organized in 1966. It is a town board. Its members are appointed by the Georgetown Selectmen. And when it was formed, its purpose was to record the past, to preserve for coming generations whatever has been left to us by earlier citizens, and to provide a background of interest for all who make a home in this New England town, which is really pretty similar to what the society does, but the difference being they are a town board. The Georgetown Historical Society, which we are, was first organized in 1959, and in 1962 it became incorporated as a private nonprofit corporation. And we've been in business since that time. In 1975, we finally got our own museum, the Brocklebank Museum, and the society, according to its bylaws, was started to cultivate and encourage an interest in historical and antiquarian research, to collect and treasure significant historical matter and artifacts, and found and maintain a museum where such collections shall be preserved and exhibited, and to do all these things, including the acquisition of real estate, to further the accomplishment of these ends, thus making a valuable, interesting, and educational feature in the life of Georgetown. So aside from founding the museum, it's pretty much the same goals as the Historical Commission. But we are private. Our members are not, we have no paid staff within our board or membership. And we are private. We have to do our own fundraising. The Historical Commission gets their funds mostly through CPC, and they're starting a new fundraising, Friends of the Historical Commission, is that what you're calling it, Ed? Right. To try to raise some funds for some of their ongoing projects.
Tax deductible, the same as the one for the society.
Yeah, so a lot of the things we do the same. We have, Ed is a member of both the commission and the society, and we have some other members of past members that have done both. So and they turn to us if they need some research, say, oh, this house is in danger of being torn down. What's the history behind it? and we take care of doing that. So we work very closely together. And we always try to have a member on the commission, also on our board of directors, so that we can keep up with what they're doing. We have Ed is the one doing it right now, and he at each meeting gives us a report of what the commission is doing, and so we know what's going on with them, and he can report if he wants to tell the commission what we're doing, we can do that. So anyhow, back to GHS, what is it that we do? So I got a nice visual aid here. So I was trying to think of what are the priorities that we have, and I think first and foremost it's education. We need to get members to help support us, and the way we do that is we have to get people excited about our history. People need to be interested. If they don't care, they're not going to want to be part of us. So education, first and foremost, in my mind. And how do we do that? Well, we do things like the Pembroke tour. Every year we have our third graders from the Pembroke school walk down, and they do a tour of the museum in June, and it's a lot of fun. It's a very busy time. We have, 100 or so kids coming into our little museum. We split them into groups, and each group starts in one particular room. It was, 5 groups in 5 different rooms, and they get a 15-minute talk there, and then the bell rings, and then they shift to the next room, and it's a very fun, very active day. You have a group of 20 kids, and you have to keep them interested for 15 minutes in what you have to say about your room. So it can be challenging, but it's a lot of fun. And then, go ahead, Ed.
Can I mention just one thing here? You mentioned this, and what this does oftentimes, it'll bring the parents. I don't know how many times I've taken the kids through. Oh, I'm sorry, you're gonna say that.
That was where I was going next.
Okay.
What Ed was saying is we always encourage the kids to come back and bring their parents, so their parents can see it. We also send every kid home with a little brochure and tell them, make sure your parents join the Historical Society. I told you, I'm always pushing the society. So we try to get the parents back and get them interested too. Hopefully the kids will go home and tell about the museum, tell how much fun they had, and they'll come back. I know when my kids, when my son first went through it, he was the first one, and he told me all about it, and you really gotta come see it. So I did indeed go back that summer and toured it because he told me I had to. So it works sometimes. So that's one way we educate the people, and of course through the museum, anyone who comes through the museum, they're going to get the whole story about Georgetown and some of the interesting things. Another way is through, we have our cemetery tours that I do each year. I do a historical cemetery tour and a Halloween cemetery tour in October. Historical tour is about some of the kind of more important people in town over the years, and the Halloween one is more, I try to make that a little creepier. We have stories about hauntings and witches. I don't have enough of those, so I fill it in also with tragic deaths. A lot of people who lived ordinary lives but had rather extraordinary deaths. And that's proven to be fairly popular, and not only is it a great way to get people interested in our history, but it also makes them care about our cemeteries, our historic cemeteries. The Historical Commission, again we go back to the commission, spent a lot of CPA funds on fixing up the cemetery. We've got stones dating back to 1732. A lot of them were in very rough shape. You couldn't read them because of the growth on them. A lot of them were broken or are tipping over, and a lot of money was put into fixing it up and making it something very special, because people think, well, the people that died a long time ago, why do we care? This is it's an outdoor art gallery, our cemeteries, our ancient cemeteries, because this is early Puritan artwork. Artists in those days were pretty uncommon. So if a guy had a creative bent, he would be a stone carver or a furniture maker. He had, this is how they would put their creative juices to work. So it's important. It's not just about people that died a long time ago. It's folk art right there. So I try to get people interested in our cemeteries so they will support the commission when they go looking for more money to do more work on the cemetery. So it's an important piece of education also. We also have a quarterly newsletter, which I try to always have at least one story about our local history to help educate the people. And special exhibits we also do from time to time. We had, for the past 4 years, we had a special exhibit on the Civil War. We were not celebrating, we were commemorating the 150th anniversary of the Civil War from 2011 through 2014 at the museum, we had a special exhibit, and in conjunction with that, we were doing newspaper articles. I don't know if does anyone read the Georgetown Record? We got a few records. If you read Georgetown in the Civil War, that was to go along with our Civil War exhibit. So that is, and talks. We have guest speakers from time to time on subjects of historical interest. This particular one was during the time of our Civil War exhibit. We had Bill Hallett come in and talk about the trains of the Civil War, which was very well attended. Bill always brings a good crowd.
Well, this last one that you did, Chris, for the annual meeting?
Yep,
When they were
that was
there?
Bill again, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he draws a good crowd. He's very good, very interesting guy. Next up, on education is research. We can't just sit back on our laurels and go, well, we've got the museum, we're doing these things, that's good enough. We have to keep learning. We have to keep it fresh. We'll never learn everything there is about Georgetown, so we keep researching. I frequently get emails from people. In fact, I got one just last night. I just bought a historic house in Georgetown. Can you tell me the history of it? A lot of people do that. When I first got those, I would go, oh sure, and I would spend hours doing all the history and send it to them and say, would you like to join the society, or donations are always welcome, and I wouldn't hear anything more about them. And so after I put in many hours doing this sort of thing, I went, there's got to be a better way. So now I say, well, the deeds online, Salem Deeds are now online, which makes it a lot easier. So I tell them, go to Salem Deeds and you can do it yourself, or, because that can be very complicated for people who don't know how to do it, you can join the society and I'll give you 2 free hours of research. So that I found, I've got a number of members doing that, so it's worked very well. But in doing this, it's great because they'll send me their address and I will do the deed research, and sometimes we find out some really interesting things that we didn't know before about this house, and I'm going to start sharing them with the commission so they can maybe get it into the Makers database. So we're always learning things that way. I also get a lot of queries of people doing their genealogy, and same thing. My great grandfather lived in Georgetown. Here's his name. Can you find any information I'm looking for? When he died, or who his wife was, or things like that. And I also do that sort of thing, and we found a lot of interesting things. And the internet makes it so much easier these days. We have Salem Deeds online now. I used to have to drive down to Salem all the time to do research. I can just go online. We have the Georgetown has put the town records are now all online through the library. We have the old newspapers, especially, I was so excited recently we got the Georgetown Advocates online at the library. Those are the newspapers from 1874 to 1899, and those can be an interesting read. So if you guys haven't gone to the library website and looked at any of these things, you might want to check those out. We also have the Georgetown yearbooks just went up, so we have a lot of great historical stuff just through the library website. So research is a very important part. Sometimes we kind of debunk myths, and people don't like that.
You gotta have folklore.
Yeah, we have myths, and sometimes they're debunked. But in cases like Cuffy Dole, I kind of debunked the myth about him not being buried in the cemetery. But I found so much information on him that I really think it's far more interesting than the myth. That's my opinion. But research is very important to keep people interested. Then we have, of course.
Did you continue on Cuffy Dole? I think some of the people may not realize that he was a black man and what the cemetery situation was.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess that's getting a little off topic,
Yeah.
but yeah, for those who don't know, Cuffy Dole was a former slave that lived in Georgetown for many years, and there was the myth that he was the first black man to die in town, and they didn't know what to do with him, and had a big meeting about it, and decided that they would bury him, that he couldn't be buried in the cemetery with the white folks, so they buried him just outside the cemetery. No, there was no logic for that. Number one, he wasn't the first black person to die in town. There were about a dozen before him. Where did they bury him? Well, back in those days, the northwest corner of the cemetery was considered the least desirable part. So that is where they would bury the paupers. That is where they would bury the slaves or the people of ill repute. They would all, and that is exactly where Cuffy is. He is in what was at that time the northwest corner of the cemetery. He couldn't be buried in with the white folks. He had to be buried in the corner. Yeah.
Which cemetery?
Oh, Union Cemetery.
All right.
Union. We didn't, Harmony didn't even exist at that point. It was he died in 1860.
I thought they said he was now in the center of the cemetery.
He is now, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, they had more land purchases, so he is now in the center, but at that time he was in the northwest section. He was not the first black person to die in town. Like I say, there were about a dozen before him. There was no controversy over it. It was very cut and dried. Okay, Cuffy died in the northwest corner. So that is Cuffy, getting a little off topic, but that's relevant. So anyhow, back to so fundraising. Being a nonprofit corporation, we are always trying to raise funds. We own and operate, of course, the Samuel Brocklebank Museum on East Main Street, and you probably know what you pay or used to pay in homeowners insurance. Well, believe me, insuring a museum is a whole lot worse than that. Now we get back to that. Very, very old house with a wooden roof, and it's full of antiques, and it costs a bloody fortune to pay the insurance on it, and that's a very, very big part of the money that we take in goes to insurance. There's also, there's other things, we pay for, if we have to get more books, we sell books and office supplies and things like that, but a very big chunk goes, unfortunately, just to insurance. So, we're always doing fundraising with things like cemetery tours. That's one of our fundraisers. This year we had an antiques appraisal. That was a lot of fun. That was something new this year. And if you didn't go this year, you should go another time. I think Sue went, didn't she? You guys go? So that was a lot of fun. So everybody who went there probably was saying, "Oh, you got to do this again." So as long as we can line up Dan Meter, I'm hoping we can. I think we will do it again next year. And other fundraising things are sales. We have merchandise, various books. Excuse me, I was mentioning about Cuffy Dole. That's one of our books that we have for sale, and the Georgetown books. So that's all part of our fundraisers. And we're always looking for. I'm always pushing memberships, as I told you guys, and that's the two biggest places that our money comes from is memberships and donations. So that is what pays for most of our stuff. And then the other thing, of course, I mentioned is our Brocklebank Museum. How many have been there? How many have toured the museum? Okay, we got a few more hands on that one. That's good. That's good. I'm glad to see that. Museum has been owned by us since 1975. I haven't been involved in it that long, but it's a great little place. We have a lot of interesting stories. We've made a lot of changes in the last few years. Our Civil War exhibit is put away now, but we have a new exhibit called the Early Businesses of Georgetown, and businesses that were in Georgetown in the 1800s. We have one room set up for that, and we have a new bridal gown exhibit. I know you guys probably wouldn't be too interested in that, but I was excited to put that together. So we've got a lot of interesting things at the museum for people to come see, and we hope those of you who haven't been yet will come and see it. And I think that's about it that I have to say, unless you guys, I'll answer some questions.
Yes. Can you donate something put in there?
You can?
Do you have all tools and everything like that?
We got a lot of tools, yeah.
Okay.
The problem with tools is right now,
I have one
don't have
I'll
a place,
donate.
we don't really have a place to
An
display.
old
them.
smoke shade.
A what?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Smoke shade.
It's an old one.
Okay. Well, you can, if you wanna send us an email, we're at info@georgetownhistoricalsociety.com. No, or do you do email? No, okay. Then you can give the information
When
to
is
Ed.
it open?
Give the information to Ed.
Okay.
And I pass it on to our curator, and we decide, the thing is, our museum is getting very full now, so when people come forward, we have to really, consider, number one, is it something we don't already have? And do we have room for it, depending on the size, and also the importance to telling the story of Georgetown. If somebody comes in and has an old piece of furniture, doesn't have any connection to Georgetown, well, it's a nice antique, if it's a really valuable one, yeah, we may very well take it. But, if it's just a nice old antique piece of furniture with no Georgetown connection, we may not. However, if it has a great Georgetown connection, oh, this was in the Spofford family for 200 years. Okay, now we've got the Georgetown connection with it, and that would make it a more important item for us to accept. So where the museum is getting full, we have to really be kind of choosy now about what we take in, and for me, you know, the most important thing is, does it help us tell the story of Georgetown? Now, a lot of the houses just kind of set up as an old house. We get a lot of antiques, but we're trying to incorporate more stuff that tells about Georgetown specifically, not just about what things were like in the days gone by.
Just as a point here, years ago, there used to be a barn next to the house, and that came down. We were hoping over the years, and maybe we'll see it someday in our lifetime, a barn where we could put items like old carriages and tools that Alex is talking about, specifically.
It would be great. That barn burned down years ago. You were there, didn't you remember that? The problem with that, of course, when they had the barn, it was all one lot from like Pembroke Ave over to whoever's driveway it is, a ways up. It was all one lot. The lots have been split off, so we have a smaller lot, and our lot line isn't all that far from the house. So I think if we tried to put in a barn, we'd run into two big problems that they didn't have back then. That's number one, Wetlands Protection Act, we're near the Penn Brook, so we would have to have it a ways up. And the lot line setback, I think we basically, probably the only place we could put it is right in front of the schoolhouse. And we really wouldn't wanna do that, so, you know, I know a lot of people said we should get a barn, and it would be great, but I just, because of the change in the lot lines and wetland laws, I don't think it'll ever be a reality, which is unfortunate.
In regard to your Civil War picture there.
Yeah.
I think it's Union Cemetery. I used to put out flags at Memorial Day, and there's one there that says that a local boy gave his name and everything. He was wounded in the Civil War, but he's not buried here because he was on his way home. It's all on the stone.
Yeah.
He was on his way home when they buried him on the banks of the Mississippi
Oh,
River.
I know who that is, that's Theodore Crosby, yep.
Probably is. I'd like, if you read these old stones, the flat ones, you
Yeah.
know, you can
Yeah.
still read them. They're very interesting.
He was, the reason I know who that was, I was getting back to where I had done the newspaper articles about the Civil War. And one of the series I did was 50th Regiment Company K,
Yeah.
which Theodore Crosby was in, and he talks about that.
Yeah,
The
I
man,
was surprised, but very interesting.
yeah, the man Solomon Nelson, who wrote about that, talked
Yeah.
about Theodore. He was very young, he was just a teenager,
Yeah,
he
young
was
guy.
very well liked by all the men, and he got sick as they were heading home, he got very sick and didn't make it home. There were three men that they had to bury by the banks of the Mississippi.
Chris, since you do the cemetery tours, could you touch a little bit on some of the elaborate carvings and stuff that are there on the stones over periods of time?
Okay.
Some of them are.
Yeah, guys are interested in that. I was talking about how it's like an art gallery. Yeah, and I wish, I wish I had known you might ask me that. I could have brought pictures along. We have our earliest stones have what's called the death's heads, and they are a skull, like a skull head with wings, and that was the common motif of the earliest ones. And then they went into soul effigies. For a while they got away from the skulls, but they were like, you know, just kind of round faces that didn't particularly look human, but they weren't skeletal either. And then they went into the fancier portrait stones, which were very obvious human faces, but still again with the wings. And these were what the stones looked like in the 1700s. We have the oldest section of the cemetery starts in 1732. And in about 1800 to 1850, an awful lot of stones had the willow and urn motif, which is, you know, like Grecian type urn with a weeping willow hanging over it. And that represents the urn represents the remains of the departed, although they weren't in urns. They didn't cremate in those days. Everybody was buried, but it's just representative of their remains. And the willow representing the living, weeping over the mourning the dead. And then from about 1850 on, we got, you know, into more elaborate, individualized gravestones. You got the big obelisks, the big tall ones. How important am I? How high is my gravestone? So you can kind of judge the wealth and importance of a person by the size of their gravestone by then. And they became more individualized. They would often have fraternal organization insignia. Is that what it's called? fraternal organization, what their thing is. Or something to do with their trade. You'd find like a hammer on the stone of a carpenter, for instance. So became much more individualized. You have a question?
Isn't it true that the Spalding family are really responsible for what is left down there on that corner?
What is left on what corner?
The Spalding family that had the woodworking shop down there, didn't they donate that building?
Oh, the
The
little
Historical
shed?
Society, I think they sold it. I think that was
Really?
it was a monetary sale.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was, yeah, because we took out a mortgage.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they sold it to us. So, yes, it was the last family that occupied the Brockleback Museum was the Spaldings. They bought, the Spaldings bought it in 1931 from Spofford's. We had Spofford's there before that. Weren't a lot of families lived in the Brockleback. I can very easily list them off, which is pretty much, when you talk about a building that was built around 1680, the fact that I can very easily spew off the few families that have lived there is pretty impressive. But people kept it for a long time.
For folks that haven't,
You want to get up here and talk? Join
no,
me
no,
and
no,
talk?
no, one sentence here. For the folks that haven't been on the cemetery tour, I can't praise her enough. It's fantastic the amount of research and history that goes into that. The tour's gotta be, close to an hour or
It's an hour
thereabouts,
long, yes.
hour tour. And, it's by donation, and she just does a wonderful job at it. And I think you'd learn a lot, find out a lot about Georgetown history if you have an opportunity. This summer, there's a number of tours that you get.
October, I usually go.
October, yeah.
So I had fun. And the way that, Dick,
Well, when you're done with, what was Captain Brocklebank's commission? Was he
he
a
was a
military captain,
local
a sea
militia.
captain, or,
local militia.
okay, all right.
And he died, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you
He
can
died,
tell.
he
a
died
little bit.
during King Philip's War. Actually, I'll run through the quick history of the museum if you like that. We started with Captain Samuel Brocklebank, which, Mythbuster, he probably never actually set foot in the house. But he definitely, he owned the property. He came over with his mother and his brother in they left England in 1638 and they settled here with a bunch of other families from Raleigh, England in 1639. So when he grew up, bought a bunch of land, including 72 acres in what we now call Georgetown. But at the time of his death, he left his will, and in his will, he left his homestead to his son Joseph, which was over in East Raleigh. Homestead, that's where you live. He left his son Samuel the farm in the western part of Raleigh. No mention of buildings. In those days, it was very important, any deed or anything, always said with buildings thereon. In the case of his house, he's very specific. The house with the barn and the kiln, and he very specific about every single piece of every type of building that was on that land, where Samuel got just the farm without any mention of buildings. So it was more likely his son Samuel who built the house, and that's one of my, oh no, why would you debunk that type of thing, but yeah, Captain Samuel's probably more son Samuel Museum. So anyhow, I was in the Brocklebank Museum family for the generations of Captain Samuel, well, he owned the land anyway, son Samuel, son Francis, and then Francis's two daughters. The two daughters had moved away though before they inherited it, so they sold it to their stepbrother, Dudley Tyler, who ran a tavern there. And we have, in here, we have the original tavern sign from those days. This sign dates back to when Dudley took over. He didn't actually buy the place till, he never registered deeds, we don't know exactly, but the sign says 1754, but the girls still owned it in 1755. So, but I think he may have been running a tavern there because nobody else lived there, so he could have run it before he actually owned it. So the sign says 1754 on it. Dudley ran it till, 1765, he sold it to Solomon Nelson, who also ran a tavern there. A very important time because now you're at the time leading up to the American Revolution. What are taverns in those days? That's a gathering place. That's where you gather to discuss what's going on, the politics of the day, what's happening, where do we stand in all this. And this is also, the militia trained on the green, which was not, it was practically out in front of the tavern. So the guys the local militia would go and train on the green. And where do you head afterwards? Well, you're kind of thirsty from your training, you're gonna head over to the tavern. So it's a very important gathering place. And on our sign also, it's a little hard to see, this is just a little picture. But if you come and visit, it's actually pretty big, it's like that. There are holes in the sign. And the story goes that when the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, our local militia, of course, they heard about it. The word traveled very fast, and they packed up and they headed off into Boston. But after a couple of days, they didn't see any action, and they came back home. And one of the guys wanted to be able to brag that he'd shot a red coat. So I took a little target practice on, yes, there is a red coat. We have the picture on it is, actually, I'm gonna give you all your own brochure, but we have a red-coated general, which is said to be General Wolfe. Of course, remember, we were all British back then, so at one point, he was considered a big hero. Once the revolution started, guys in red coats were no longer our heroes or our friends. So they put some holes in it. So we have some holes in the sign, and we don't bother to patch it because they are from the start of the American Revolution, which is pretty exciting piece. So we had Solomon Nelson had the tavern during the time of the Revolution. And then he sold the building, or gave the building to his son Paul, who had a store there. So get all sorts of interesting people and things that it's done. After Paul, it went to kind of a house flipper for a short while. The guy who owned it for 1 year and sold it for a lot more than he bought it for, so I assume he fixed it up nice. And then we had Reverend Charles Beecher there, and that's a whole nother story. I'm not even going to get into it. But Reverend Charles Beecher was the brother of Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, and also the brother of Henry Ward Beecher, who was a very famous speaker in those days. And Charles was controversial in his own right, but like I said, I could talk for an hour on him alone, so I'm not going to get into it. But for those of you who are on the internet, we have our newsletter on our website. Our website is www.georgetownhistoricalsociety.com. If you go to newsletter archives back, let's see, July 2013, I think it was, I did a series of articles on the Beecher family. So if you guys are interested in more information, you can look that up.
Well, we just have more that we can have you come back for, that's all.
Yeah, that's a long one. So after the Beechers, it went back to being a private, well, it was private residence for them, but, I should mention Charles Beecher, he was the minister at the church across the street, the Old South Church. I have a picture of a painting, and you can see the old church in this painting. This is a painting that was basically from the viewpoint of our front door of the museum. This is what Elm Street area looked like in about mid-1800s, and there's the church there. So Charles was minister right across the street from the church. And after the Beechers, it went to the Spofford family, and then the Spaldings, and then Historical Society got it in 1975. So how many houses built in 1600s? Can a person easily memorize all the owners of it? I've researched houses built in the 1950s that have twice as many owners as this place has had. Yeah, it's really amazing that there have been so few, because people would get the house and it would stay in a family for several generations, particularly in the old days. That was very common. You know, these days, every few years a house is being sold in cities. Any other questions? No? Well, before you guys go, you're all going to get a brochure, because like I say, I'm always selling the society. There is indeed a membership form in the brochure, and I hope that I've gotten you excited about what we do. Like I say, we can't exist without our friends and members supporting us. I'm very proud to say that in the last few years, our membership has more than doubled, which is great. We were kind of, membership was faltering for a while, but we.
That's under Chris's leadership, I gotta say.
I can be your,
I was gonna say that, but thank you, Ed. I have just been more active in recruiting people like what I'm doing today. And I always have brochures in my pocketbook. If anyone asks me about local history and they're interested, I'll go, well, I always have a brochure, and I'll whip one out, and I always encourage people to join. And I just want people to be interested in our history. I want people to be excited about our history. I want people to go, that's interesting, I want to learn more about it, and send me their research. So I'm glad you guys listened to me today. Nobody fell asleep, so that was a good thing. I'm hoping I might see a few joinings of the society. We also have, for those of you on the internet, I mentioned our website. We also have our email address on there that you can look up. We're on Facebook. If any of you guys are on Facebook, you can join us on there. We have anyone can post on there, so a lot of people post pictures of old things, old pictures and such. So that's a lot of fun to just follow that. And
Just one last plug here. People don't realize how old Georgetown is. It was basically, as Chris pointed out, it was West Raleigh
Yes, yeah, you're
years
somehow
ago.
connected, right?
And when you think that the Plymouth Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620, it wasn't a few years later that you have a building like the Historical Museum constructed here in West Newbury, which ultimately became Georgetown. So you've got to go down and see the place. You'll be very impressed.
And some people think, well, what kind of history can we have? We were founded in 1838, but it's true what Ed said. We were part of Raleigh, so our history goes back really to 1639 when Raleigh was founded. So we do have a very old history, and we do have a few very old houses in town. We have a lot of houses that predate the formation of Georgetown.
There's something, Pilgrims came here, and they're, that's the first generation. Those people sold Indian ladies to South America for $10,000 each.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I do want to thank
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for being